Let me tell you something that'll stick with you. This is not your average press conference. This isn't just some diplomatic back and forth. No, this is a moment, a seismic game-changing shift in the room kind of moment. Because what you're about to hear, it's not just an answer, it's a wake-up call. Picture the scene. Bright lights. International forum. All eyes forward. Room, cameras rolling, leaders lined up like dominoes. The West sitting tall, chests puffed, owning the narrative. Or so they thought. It all started with one question, just one. But that question, simple on the surface, was a match tossed into a room full of dry paper. Imagine the setting, a global forum, a world stage, cameras rolling, suits pressed, faces calm but alert, every eye focused, room and every word calculated, the kind of space where power is measured not by volume but by posture, by control, by the subtle silence before a storm. On one side, room. Representatives from the world's most powerful countries. The United States, the UK, Europe, sitting like seasoned referees, ready to judge the next move. On the other, India, once seen as the underdog, now sitting tall, calm, and unshaken. And then she stands up, a young American woman, brighted sharp, trained by headlines, podcasts, and narratives repeated enough times to feel like truth. Room. She's not disrespectful. No, she's polished, confident, and her tone is coded with the certainty of someone who believes they're standing on moral high ground. She looks across the room, takes the mic, and asks the question that slices through the air like a blade. Why is India buying oil from Russia when the West has imposed sanctions? Doesn't that violate global ethics? Boom. Just like that, the energy in the room changes. You could feel it like a wire pulled too tight. Some people lean forward in anticipation. Some glance sideways to see who will react first. A few reporters freeze, fingers hovering over their keyboards, smelling blood and headlines. India caught red-handed. Global ethics breached. You can almost hear the click of mental cameras locking onto their target, India, because that question wasn't just a query. It was a challenge, and not just to policy, but to principle, to position. It wasn't just about oil. It was about loyalty, morality, and who gets to define what global ethics even means. And make no mistake, this wasn't an accident. This was strategy. A classic move from the Western playbook. Frame a narrative, ask a loaded question, and let the target fumble under the weight of guilt and moral pressure. But this time it didn't go to plan, because across from her, sitting steady, patient, unbothered, was Dr. Subramaniam Jaishankar. Not a man easily rattled, not a man who reacts. A man who responds with precision. A career diplomat who's been in war rooms and crisis meetings across decades of geopolitical tension. You don't trap someone like Jaishankar with a rehearsed moral line. So he leans into the mech. No smile, no smirk, no drama, just truth, and calmly says, "We do what's in your interest. We do what's in our interest. And trust me, we know how to take care of our own people." The room doesn't explode, it freezes. There's no cheering, no clapping, just silence. The kind of silence that comes when someone says something so undeniably real, it leaves no room for spin. It wasn't just a rebuttal. It was a reality check. He didn't explain, didn't apologize, didn't stutter. He didn't scramble to defend India like it was on trial, because it wasn't. India wasn't breaking rules. It was breaking illusions. The illusion that the West always holds the ethical compass. The illusion that every other nation must explain themselves while Western interests are treated as default truths. And in that moment, the question that was meant to corner India ended up cornering the West. Because that one sentence carried centuries of restraint, centuries of being judged, policed, told how to think. How to act, how to trade, how to behave. That one question reminded us all. There was a time when India had to beg for economic survival, when it followed every Western directive just to stay afloat. But that time is over. Now India doesn't justify its decisions. It declares them. You do what's in your interest, we'll do what's in ours. Let that sink in. It's not defiance. It's independence, not arrogance. Awareness. That young woman may have come in thinking she was delivering a lesson, but she left with an education, because that's the shift no one saw coming. The West is used to questions being tools of control. But this time, India turned the question into a mirror reflecting every double standard, every contradiction. And it left the world uncomfortable. Why? Because when Europe continues to buy gas from Russia, it's called energy strategy. When India does it, it's ethically questionable. When America wages wars in the name of peace, It's called defense. When India protects its interests, it's controversial. Room. That one question was meant to expose India, but it ended up exposing something else. The rules aren't equal. And for once, someone had the clarity and the courage to say it out loud. Dr. Jaishankar didn't speak to impress the West. He spoke to wake up the world, especially young Indians watching, because that moment wasn't just about oil. It was about identity. It was about showing that you don't need to conform to someone else's morality playbook just to earn respect. It was about knowing who you are, what your nation stands for, and refusing to let someone else rewrite your story. That moment was a masterclass in diplomatic power, the kind that doesn't scream, doesn't shake, doesn't ask for permission. It just owns the room. So the next time someone throws a question your way trying to shake your ground, remember this moment. Remember that one calm voice can silence an entire room, not because it shouted, but because it stood on truth. And that truth began with a simple sentence: you do what's in your interest. We do what's in ours. And that is the power of the question that sparked it all. But then he speaks, doctorate, Jaishankar, calm, controlled, deadly accurate. And this is what he says: you do what's in your interest. We do what's in our interest. And trust me, we know how to take care of our own people. A fire. Game over. Fire. He didn't yell, didn't flinch, didn't explain himself like a kid in detention. He dropped a truth so sharp it sliced through decades of condescension in one sentence. That right there, that wasn't just a mic drop. That was a tectonic shift, because he wasn't just answering her, he was addressing an entire system. A system that talks about fairness while moving the goalposts. We're a system that calls out others while hiding behind its own hypocrisy. And in that moment, India stood taller than ever. You see, the world forgets this ain't 1991 India. This isn't the India that took IMF loans with folded hands. This isn't the India that kept quiet while others played global chess. This is the India that rose from its knees brick by brick, bite by bite, bullet by bullet. So if you want to talk ethics, let's talk about empires built on stolen land. Let's talk about human rights lessons from nations that bombed others into rubble. Let's talk about lectures on peace from countries with trillion-dollar war machines. Jaishankar didn't debate. He didn't beg, he stated facts. And that girl, she walked in with a plan, but she walked out with an education, because here's what people need to understand, especially young Indians watching this. Dr. Jaishankar isn't just defending policy, he's modeling confidence. He's showing you that clarity beats volume, that you don't need to shout to be heard. He didn't embarrass her, he freed her. He shattered the illusion that the West way is the only way. India is no longer asking for a seat at the table. India is the table. Why? Because when Europe buys gas from Russia, it's national interest. But when India does it, it's a problem. No, not anymore. That narrative, it's broken. Let's get real. The West built control through narratives, media, money, and might. But India is building its own story: satellites, digital economy, a vaccine diplomacy, sovereign trade deals. India standing tall, facing the West, facing China, and saying we'll be friends, but we won't be puppets. And Jaishankar, he's not just a diplomat, he's a mirror. And every time they try to test India, he reflects their contradictions right back. That's not arrogance, that's awareness. That's not aggression, that's assertion. And guess what? He does it without raising his voice, because truth doesn't need a microphone. It just needs a spine, a history lesson. They didn't expect. You know what I love about this moment? It wasn't just a clapback. It was a blueprint for confidence, for sovereignty, for self-respect. And if you're listening, really listening, here's what I want you to take from it. Don't let anyone define your ethics. Don't let anyone question your path just because it's not theirs. Don't ever flinch when your truth is challenged. Stand tall. Speak clear. Own your space, because the world doesn't respect the loudest voice. It respects the voice that knows exactly what it stands for. And today that voice sounds like India. India is no longer the quiet student in the back of the global classroom. It's the one raising its hand, correcting the teacher, and setting the record straight. For decades, the world looked at India through a colonial lens, a country that needed help, aid, approval, permission. At that era, it's over. What this means for young Indians when Dr. Jaishankar responded with calm clarity saying, we'll do what's in our interest. He wasn't just defending a policy. room. He was declaring that India is done playing second fiddle. That single sentence dismantled the old mindset that the West sets the rules and the rest follow. Not anymore. Today's India is confident, calculated, and completely unapologetic about its choices. It doesn't wait for validation from Washington, London, or Brussels. It acts based on one metric: what's best for the Indian people. And that shift, that's what the world is struggling to grasp. They're used to countries folding under pressure, not standing tall in the spotlight. But Jaishankar showed that India's foreign policy is no longer about alignment with power blocks. It's about alignment with purpose. The moment that changed the narrative. So when a young American asks why India isn't following the West lead, what she's really doing without realizing it is repeating a pattern of superiority that India has already broken free from. And Jaishankar, he doesn't need to be emotional. His response carries the full weight of a rising India, an India that's economically strong, diplomatically sharp, and morally clear-eyed. This isn't about rebellion. It's about independence. India is not anti-West. It's just pro-India now, and that's what the world has to get used to. For years, the West has operated under a self-driven moral license, claiming to be the guardians of democracy, ethics, and human rights. But peel back the surface, and the cracks are everywhere. The very countries that preach peace have waged endless wars. The same nations that push sanctions on others continue to buy oil and arms when it suits their own interests. This double standard has become the backbone of Western diplomacy. And Dr. S. Jaishankar, he isn't afraid to call it out loud and clear, speaking truth without fear. When Jaishankar was asked why India continues to buy oil from Russia while the West pushes sanctions, his response wasn't just logical, it was layered with quiet fire. He flipped the mirror back on the question itself. If Europe is buying gas from Russia, why is it a problem only when India does it? The silence that followed wasn't just awkward. It was revealing because, for the first time, a leader from the global South wasn't playing defense. He was putting the West on trial using their own logic. This is what the world isn't used to. Being challenged by a nation they once thought could be lectured into compliance. And Jaishankar didn't need emotion or aggression to do it. He exposed the hypocrisy through facts. The truth is Western powers aren't uncomfortable with India's rise because of its policies. They're uncomfortable because India's rise is independent, not controlled, not colonized, not choreographed. That's what really threatens the system. And every time Jaishankar speaks, he isn't just making a point. He's tearing down the illusion that only the West has the moral high ground. He's showing that India doesn't need to imitate anyone. It only needs to stay true to its own people. When Dr. Jaishankar speaks, it's never just a response. It's a masterclass in clarity. No shouting, no dramatics. No emotional outbursts, just cold, precise facts delivered with surgical calm. Final word from a rising India, and that's what makes his words so powerful. He doesn't need to raise his voice because his confidence is built on something stronger: truth in a world filled with loud diplomacy and louder propaganda. Jaishankar's approach is refreshingly disruptive. He doesn't argue to impress. He speaks to correct that one line: you do what's in your interest. We'll do what's in ours. Wasn't just a statement, it was a diplomatic punch delivered with a velvet glove. It silenced the room, not because it was aggressive, but because it was unshakably accurate. No defense, no apology, just reality. That's the power of calm conviction. And the reason it works, because it exposes the contradiction in global expectations. The idea that countries like India must explain every move while Western nations act freely and without question. What makes Jaishankar different is his ability to educate while dismantling bias. He doesn't attack individuals, he confronts systems. He uses words like a scalpel, not a sword. And that's the kind of communication today's leaders and everyday people need to learn. Assertiveness isn't about being loud, it's about being grounded. India's foreign policy under Jaishankar is no longer about fitting into someone else's box. It's about building a new framework altogether, one where dignity, national interest, and truth speak louder than old world diplomacy. And the world is still catching up to that. So here's the bottom line. What Dr. Jaishankar did wasn't just a diplomatic move. It was a mindset shift. It was India looking the world in the eye and saying, we're not here to play your game, we're here to play our own. This moment, this calm, unshakable, brutally honest moment wasn't just about foreign policy. It was about self-respect. It was about rewriting the rules of engagement for every Indian.